A poor, humble little girl in dirty clothes rushes to find help after discovering a boy in a wheelchair, unconscious on the busiest street in the city. With no phone of her own, she calls the maid of a wealthy mansion, unaware that the boy is actually the son of a powerful millionaire. What happens next will restore your faith in humanity. Before we begin, I'd like to know a little about where you live. How's the weather there today? If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to follow us for more content like this. The morning sun cast long shadows across Riverside Avenue, the busiest street in downtown Hartford, where luxury cars rushed past like metallic rivers. 7-year-old Maria Santos pressed her small face against the cold window of her mother's beat-up Honda, watching the endless stream of traffic with wide, curious eyes. "Mama, why do rich people drive so fast?" she asked in her soft, innocent voice. Carmen Santos glanced at her daughter through the rearview mirror while navigating through the morning rush. "They're always in a hurry, mija, always rushing to make more money." Her weathered hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as she thought about her own destination, the Blackwood mansion on Elm Street, where she worked as a housekeeper. Maria had been asking to come to work with her for weeks. School was out for summer break, and finding childcare on Carmen's meager salary was nearly impossible. Today she'd finally given in, hoping Mrs. Blackwood wouldn't notice the little girl playing quietly in the servants' quarters. "Will I get to see the big house, Mama?" Maria's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You'll stay in the kitchen with me, understand? Rich people don't like children running around their fancy things." Carmen's voice carried years of learned caution. She'd worked for the Blackwood family for 3 years, ever since her husband's death in a construction accident left her desperate for steady income. The Blackwood mansion loomed before them like something from a fairy tale. 3 stories of pristine white stone with perfectly manicured gardens and a circular driveway lined with expensive cars. Maria's mouth fell open as they drove through the imposing iron gates. "It's like a castle, Mama." "A castle with very particular rules," Carmen warned, parking behind the service entrance. "Remember what I told you? Stay quiet, stay hidden, don't touch anything." Maria recited dutifully, though her eyes continued to wander across the magnificent estate. Inside, the mansion was even more breathtaking. Crystal chandeliers caught the morning light, casting rainbow patterns across marble floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. Maria tiptoed behind her mother, trying not to make any sound with her worn sneakers. Carmen led her to a small room adjacent to the kitchen, a cramped space with a tiny window that served as the housekeeper's break area. "This is where you'll stay, mija. I brought coloring books and your tablet." "But Mama, can't I just—" "No buts." Carmen's tone was firm but loving. "Mrs. Blackwood is particular about her privacy. And Master Thomas." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He has special needs. Any disturbance could upset him." Maria nodded solemnly. She'd heard whispers about the Blackwood boy, how he'd been in a terrible accident that left him in a wheelchair, how his father blamed him for ruining the family's reputation, how his stepmother treated him like an unwanted burden. Carmen kissed her daughter's forehead. "I'll check on you every hour. Promise me you'll stay put." "I promise, Mama." But promises, Maria would soon learn, were sometimes meant to be broken when lives hung in the balance. 2 hours passed quietly. Maria colored pictures of butterflies and watched videos on her tablet with headphones on. The little break room felt stuffy, and the small window offered only a view of the service driveway. She was beginning to understand why her mother's shoulders always sagged with exhaustion when she came home. The sound of raised voices from somewhere in the house made her look up from her coloring book. Even through the thick walls, she could hear the anger, sharp, cutting words that made her stomach twist with familiar anxiety. It sounded like the fights her parents used to have before Papa died, when money was scarce and tempers ran short. Curiosity won over obedience. Maria crept to the door and pressed her ear against it. The voices were clearer now. A man's voice, deep and furious, and a woman's voice cold as winter ice. Sick of dealing with him. "He's nothing but a constant reminder. Your own stepson, for God's sake. He can't help what happened. Accident was 3 years ago. When will you stop coddling him?" Maria's heart pounded. They were talking about Thomas, the boy in the wheelchair. Her own father had been sick for months before he died, and she remembered how scared and helpless she'd felt watching him suffer. The idea that anyone could be angry at a child for being hurt made her stomach churn. The voices faded as footsteps echoed down a distant hallway. Maria returned to her coloring, but the butterfly on the page now seemed trapped behind black crayon bars. Another hour passed before she heard it, a sound that would haunt her dreams for years to come. It was faint at first, like a cry carried on the wind. She pressed her face to the small window, trying to locate the source. There, across the street on Riverside Avenue, she saw something that made her blood freeze. A wheelchair sat motionless in the middle of the crosswalk, and slumped forward in it was a figure that could only be Thomas Blackwood. Cars were swerving around him, honking their horns, but he wasn't moving. He wasn't. Even from her distant vantage point, Maria could see that something was terribly wrong. Without thinking, she burst from the room and ran through the mansion's halls, her sneakers squeaking against the marble. She had to find her mother, had to get help, but as she rounded a corner, she collided with someone's legs and fell backward onto the hard floor. Well, what do we have here? Maria looked up into the coldest blue eyes she'd ever seen. The woman standing over her was beautiful in the way that ice sculptures are beautiful, perfect and untouchable. This had to be Mrs. Victoria Blackwood, Thomas's stepmother. I'm sorry, ma'am. I was looking for my mama. Carmen's daughter, I presume. Victoria's voice carried no warmth whatsoever. Didn't your mother teach you not to run through other people's homes? Please, ma'am, there's a boy. Thomas, he's in the street. Maria scrambled to her feet, urgency overriding her fear. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Surprise? Fear? But it was gone so quickly Maria wondered if she'd imagined it. Don't be ridiculous, child. Thomas is upstairs in his room where he belongs. But Maria had seen what she'd seen. No, ma'am, he's in the street. Cars are— Enough! Victoria's shout echoed through the hallway. You will return to wherever you came from and stay there, or your mother will find herself looking for new employment. Maria's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd promised to stay hidden, promised not to cause trouble. Her mother needed this job desperately. But outside, Thomas was in danger, and every second counted. She looked up at Victoria's face, cold, calculating, showing no concern whatsoever for her own stepson's welfare. In that moment, Maria understood something that would change everything. Victoria knew exactly where Thomas was, and she didn't care. Maria's mind raced as she stood frozen in the marble hallway, Victoria Blackwood's icy stare boring into her. The woman's lack of concern for Thomas wasn't just indifference, it was something much darker. The realization hit Maria like a physical blow. Victoria knew her stepson was in mortal danger, and she was doing nothing to help him. I understand, ma'am, Maria whispered, backing away slowly. I'll go back to the kitchen. Victoria's lips curved into what might have been a smile on someone else's face, but on hers looked more like a blade. Good girl. And remember, children should be seen and not heard, preferably not seen either. Maria turned and walked away, but her mind was screaming. She had to get help, but who could she call? Her mother would be fired instantly if Victoria discovered she'd brought Maria to work. The police? What 7-year-old called the police? They probably wouldn't even believe her. She ducked into the first room she could find, a library lined with leather-bound books that probably cost more than her family's monthly rent. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her mother's old cell phone, the one Carmen let her carry for emergencies. This was definitely an emergency. But as she started to dial 911, a better idea struck her. Maria scrolled through the phone's contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Elena, kitchen. Elena Rodriguez had worked for the Blackwoods even longer than Maria's mother. She was the head cook, a kind woman in her 50s who always saved extra cookies for Carmen to take home. More importantly, Elena had her own car and wouldn't hesitate to help a child in trouble. The phone rang once, twice. Carmen? Is everything okay? Elena's warm voice was exactly what Maria needed to hear. Elena, it's Maria. Carmen's daughter. I need help, it's about Thomas. Maria? Honey, where's your mother? Why do you have her phone? Please listen, Thomas is in the street. Riverside Avenue. He's in his wheelchair in the middle of traffic and he's not moving. I think something's wrong with him. There was a long pause. Are you sure, mija? Thomas is supposed to be. I saw him from the window. Cars are swerving around him. Elena, please, you have to believe me. Another pause, then. Where are you now? In the house. I tried to tell Mrs. Blackwood, but she said he was upstairs. She didn't want to check. Elena's sharp intake of breath told Maria everything she needed to know. The cook understood the implications immediately. Stay exactly where you are, Maria. Don't let anyone see you with that phone. I'm calling 911 right now, then I'm going to get your mother. Do you understand? Yes, but Elena… What, honey? Hurry, please hurry. The line went dead, and Maria slipped the phone back into her pocket. Through the library's tall windows, she could see the street in the distance. Traffic had backed up, horns were blaring, and she thought she could make out flashing lights approaching. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the library. Maria ducked behind a massive oak desk, her heart pounding so hard she was sure anyone could hear it. The footsteps paused outside the door, and for a terrifying moment she thought Victoria had found her. But the footsteps continued down the hall, accompanied by a man's voice she didn't recognize. Needs to look like an accident. Traffic is heavy enough this morning. Keep your voice down. Victoria's sharp whisper cut him off. The walls have ears in this house. When will you tell Richard? I'll call him in an hour, after it's too late to save him. I'll be the grieving stepmother, devastated that I couldn't reach him in time. Maria pressed her hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. She was listening to a murder plot, and the victim was a defenseless boy in a wheelchair. And the inheritance? Goes to me as Richard's wife, since Thomas has no other living relatives. Richard's too guilt-ridden about the accident to think clearly about legal matters. He signed the updated will last month. Their voices faded as they moved away, but Maria had heard enough. This wasn't just negligence. It was cold-blooded murder disguised as a tragic accident. She waited 5 more minutes before creeping out of the library. The mansion felt different now, its luxury hiding something rotten beneath the beautiful surface. Every shadow seemed threatening, every doorway a potential trap. Maria made her way back toward the kitchen, moving as quietly as possible through the maze of hallways. She had to find her mother, had to make sure Elena had reached the authorities, had to… Maria Elena Santos! Carmen's voice echoed through the house like thunder. Maria had never heard her mother sound so angry and terrified at the same time. She ran toward the sound, her sneakers slipping on the polished floors. Carmen was standing in the kitchen doorway, her face pale with panic and fury. What did you do? Carmen grabbed her daughter by the shoulders, her grip tight enough to leave marks. Elena said you called about Thomas. What were you thinking? Mama, he's in danger. Mrs. Blackwood knew, and she didn't. You promised to stay put. You promised not to cause trouble. Carmen's eyes filled with tears of frustration and fear. Do you know what this means? We could lose everything. Before Maria could respond, Elena burst through the kitchen's back door, still wearing her apron and breathing heavily from running. They found him, she gasped. Paramedics got to Thomas just in time. He was unconscious, looks like someone drugged him and left him there. Carmen's grip on Maria's shoulders loosened. Drugged? Police are calling it attempted murder. Elena's eyes met Maria's. If this little girl hadn't called when she did, the weight of what had almost happened settled over them like a heavy blanket. Thomas could have been killed, and everyone would have believed it was a tragic accident. Instead, Maria's quick thinking had saved his life and exposed a sinister plot. But as the sound of sirens grew louder outside, Maria realized their real troubles were just beginning. Victoria Blackwood was about to discover that her perfect plan had been ruined by a 7-year-old girl with a borrowed cell phone, and people like Victoria didn't forgive easily. The Blackwood mansion erupted into chaos within minutes of the paramedics' arrival. Police cars lined the circular driveway, their red and blue lights casting eerie patterns across the pristine white stone. Maria watched from the kitchen window as officers questioned staff members and cordoned off areas of the house. Carmen held her daughter close, both of them trembling from the adrenaline and fear. Elena paced the small kitchen, occasionally peering through the service entrance to gauge the situation outside. They're treating it as a crime scene, Elena whispered. Detective Morrison. He's been here before, when the gardener's tools went missing last year. Good man, very thorough. Maria's mind kept replaying the conversation she'd overheard between Victoria and the unknown man. She had to tell the police, but would they believe a 7-year-old's account? And more importantly, would Victoria realize that Maria had heard her confession? A sharp knock on the kitchen door made all three of them jump. Police. We need to speak with the staff. Elena opened the door to reveal a tall, gray-haired man in a rumpled suit. His kind eyes immediately found Maria, and he crouched down to her level. You must be the young lady who made the phone call. I'm Detective Morrison. Maria nodded, suddenly shy. Up close, the detective reminded her of her grandfather. The same gentle manner, the same patient expression. You did something very brave today, he continued. Thomas is going to be okay because of you. Is he really okay? Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. He's at Hartford General Hospital. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery. He was given a sedative, something to make him sleep, but there's no permanent damage. Carmen squeezed her daughter tighter. Detective, my daughter, she's just a child. She was supposed to stay in the break room, but Mrs. Santos, your daughter may have saved a life today. I'd like to ask her a few questions, with your permission, of course. Maria looked up at her mother, who nodded reluctantly. Can you tell me exactly what you saw from the window? Detective Morrison's voice was gentle but focused. Maria took a deep breath and recounted everything, seeing Thomas in the wheelchair, running to find help, confronting Victoria, making the call to Elena. The detective listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making notes in a small pad. When you spoke to Mrs. Blackwood, how did she react when you told her about Thomas? She said he was upstairs in his room. She seemed angry that I was telling her, like she already knew and didn't want to help. Detective Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Did she seem surprised when you told her Thomas was in the street? Maria thought carefully. For just a second, maybe. But then she got really cold and told me to go away. Maria, the detective leaned closer. This is very important. Did you see or hear anything else while you were in the house? Anything that seemed strange or wrong? This was it. Maria glanced at her mother, then back at the detective. I heard her talking to someone. A man. Carmen's grip tightened again. Maria. It's okay, Mrs. Santos. What did you hear, Maria? They were talking about making it look like an accident. And about Thomas's inheritance going to her when he died. The words tumbled out in a rush. She said she would call Mr. Blackwood after it was too late to save Thomas. The kitchen fell silent except for the distant sound of radio chatter from the police cars outside. Detective Morrison's expression had hardened considerably. Are you absolutely certain about what you heard? Yes, sir. They talked about the inheritance and how Mr. Blackwood felt guilty about Thomas's accident. Elena crossed herself. Dios mío, that poor boy. Did you recognize the man's voice? Maria shook her head. I've never heard it before. Detective Morrison stood up, his demeanor shifting from gentle questioner to determined investigator. Mrs. Santos, I'm going to need you and Maria to come to the station to give formal statements. For your safety, I don't want you in this house while we sort this out. Our safety? Carmen's voice cracked. What do you mean? If what Maria heard is true, then we're dealing with attempted murder and conspiracy. Mrs. Blackwood may not know yet that her conversation was overheard, but when she realizes the investigation is focusing on her. He didn't need to finish the sentence. Through the kitchen window, they could see Victoria Blackwood speaking with another detective near the front entrance. Even from a distance, her composure was remarkable. She looked like a concerned stepmother dealing with a family tragedy, not a woman whose murder plot had just been foiled. She looked so normal, Maria whispered. The worst ones usually do, Detective Morrison replied grimly. Elena, we'll need you to come in as well since you received the phone call and coordinated the rescue. Elena nodded. Whatever you need. That boy has been through enough already. As they prepared to leave, Maria caught one last glimpse of Victoria through the window. For just a moment, their eyes met across the distance. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something in her gaze made Maria's blood run cold. The woman knew. Somehow she knew that her plans had been overheard and reported. And as Carmen hurried her daughter toward Detective Morrison's unmarked car, Maria couldn't shake the feeling that saving Thomas's life had put her own family in terrible danger. Victoria Blackwood's perfect smile as they drove away was the most frightening thing Maria had ever seen. In the distance, an ambulance pulled away from the mansion, carrying Thomas to safety. But Maria wondered if any of them would truly be safe until Victoria Blackwood was behind bars. The war between a 7-year-old girl and a calculating killer had only just begun. The Hartford police station buzzed with activity as Detective Morrison led Maria and her mother through a maze of desks and ringing phones. The fluorescent lights cast everything in harsh relief, making the friendly detective's office feel like a sanctuary when they finally reached it. "Can I get you anything, water, hot chocolate?" Detective Morrison gestured to comfortable chairs arranged around his desk. Maria noticed family photos scattered across the surface. A smiling woman, 2 teenage children, a golden retriever. "We're fine, thank you," Carmen replied, though her hands trembled as she smoothed Maria's hair. The formal interview took nearly 2 hours. A court stenographer recorded every word while Detective Morrison guided Maria through her account with infinite patience. He asked her to repeat certain details, to describe voices and locations, to recall exact phrases from the conversation she'd overheard. "You're doing great, Maria," he assured her when she stumbled over the timeline. "Take your time." Meanwhile, across town at Hartford General Hospital, another drama was unfolding. Thomas Blackwood had regained consciousness and was providing his own shocking testimony to Detective Sarah Chen, Morrison's partner. "I remember Victoria bringing me breakfast," Thomas told her, his young voice still groggy from the sedatives. "She said she'd made my favorite, blueberry pancakes, but they tasted funny, bitter." Detective Chen leaned forward. "What happened after you ate?" "I got really sleepy, but Victoria said we should go for a walk. She pushed my wheelchair outside, said the fresh air would help." Thomas paused, his 12-year-old mind struggling to process the betrayal. "I must have fallen asleep, because the next thing I remember was sirens and paramedics." "Thomas, where did Victoria take you for this walk?" "She said we were going to the park across from Riverside Avenue, but I don't remember getting there." Detective Chen's phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. "Kid's story checks out. Victoria drugged him. Looking for accomplice now." Back at the station, Maria was describing the mysterious man's voice when Detective Morrison's phone rang. "Morrison, yes, I'll hold." He covered the phone. "It's the lab. They're rushing the toxicology results from Thomas's blood work." Carmen shifted nervously. "Detective, what happens now? Do we have to go back to the house?" "Absolutely not. We've arranged temporary housing for you and Maria until this is resolved. Mrs. Blackwood cannot know where you are. But my job, Mrs. Santos, your job is the least of our concerns right now. If Victoria Blackwood realizes that Maria overheard her confession, your daughter could be in serious danger." Maria looked up from the coloring book someone had given her. "Detective Morrison, what about Thomas? Is he safe?" "Thomas is under police protection at the hospital. His father is flying back from his business trip as we speak." The phone conversation ended, and Detective Morrison's expression grew grave. The lab confirmed it. Thomas was given a heavy dose of Rohypnol, commonly known as roofies. It's a powerful sedative that would have left him completely helpless. Carmen gasped. "She drugged a 12-year-old boy?" "It appears so, and based on the amount in his system, if he'd remained in that traffic much longer." Morrison didn't finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. A knock at the office door interrupted them. Another detective poked his head in. "Morrison, we've got a problem. Victoria Blackwood just showed up with her lawyer. She's demanding to know why her stepson was taken to the hospital without her consent, and she wants to speak with the family that made the false accusations." Detective Morrison stood up immediately. "Tell her she can speak with her lawyer, no one else. There's more. We checked the house phone records. Victoria made a call to someone named Marcus Webb 30 minutes before the incident. Webb has a record: fraud, embezzlement, assault. We're bringing him in now." Maria felt her mother's hand tighten around hers. "Is that the man I heard?" "We'll find out soon enough. Morrison replied. In the meantime, Officer Rodriguez is going to take you and your mother to a safe house. You'll be comfortable there and we'll have protection around the clock. As they prepared to leave, Maria caught sight of a familiar figure through the office window. Victoria Blackwood sat in the hallway, dressed in an elegant black suit, speaking quietly with an expensive-looking lawyer. Even in a police station, surrounded by evidence of her crimes, she maintained the appearance of a grieving stepmother. But when Victoria's eyes met Maria's through the glass, the mask slipped for just a moment. The look of pure hatred that flashed across her face made Maria step behind her mother. She sees me, Maria whispered. Detective Morrison followed her gaze and immediately moved to block the window. That's it. We're getting you out of here now. Officer Rodriguez, a kind-faced woman with gentle eyes, led them through a back entrance to an unmarked car. As they drove through Hartford's quiet residential streets, Maria pressed her face to the window, watching the familiar city pass by. Where are we going? A safe house in West Hartford, Officer Rodriguez explained. It's a regular house in a nice neighborhood. You'll have everything you need and there will always be an officer nearby. The safe house turned out to be a modest two-story home with a small yard and cheerful yellow shutters. Inside, it was furnished simply but comfortably, with a fully stocked kitchen and toys clearly intended for children. Other families have stayed here before, Officer Rodriguez explained as she showed them around. You're not the first to help solve an important case. That evening, as Maria lay in an unfamiliar bed in an unfamiliar room, she thought about Thomas alone in the hospital. Was he scared? Did he understand that his own stepmother had tried to kill him? And what about his father? How do you tell a parent that their spouse is a murderer? Carmen sat on the edge of the bed, stroking her daughter's hair. You did the right thing today, mija. Even though it was scary, even though it might cause us problems, you saved that boy's life. Mama, what if Mrs. Blackwood tries to hurt us? The police won't let that happen, Detective Morrison promised. But as Maria drifted off to sleep, she couldn't shake the memory of Victoria's eyes in the police station hallway. Some promises she was learning were harder to keep than others. Meanwhile, across town, Victoria Blackwood sat in her mansion study staring at her cell phone. The number she needed to call would solve all her problems permanently. Marcus Webb had failed her once, but he was desperate enough to try again. And this time, the target wouldn't be a 12-year-old boy in a wheelchair. It would be a 7-year-old girl who had seen too much and remembered everything. 3 days into their stay at the safe house, Maria woke to the sound of urgent voices downstairs. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, but something felt wrong. The usual quiet conversation between her mother and the morning shift officer had been replaced by sharp, worried tones. She crept to the top of the stairs and listened. Escaped from custody during transport, Officer Rodriguez was saying. Marcus Webb overpowered the guards and disappeared somewhere between the courthouse and the county jail. Carmen's voice was tight with fear. What does that mean for us? Enhanced security protocols. We're moving you to a different location immediately. Maria's heart sank. Marcus Webb, the man she'd heard conspiring with Victoria, was free. And if he was desperate enough to assault police officers during transport, he was certainly desperate enough to silence the only witness who could connect him to the attempted murder. She quickly dressed and packed her few belongings, trying to stay calm for her mother's sake. But as they prepared to leave the safe house, Detective Morrison arrived with news that changed everything. Richard Blackwood wants to meet with you, he announced without preamble. Thomas's father flew back from London as soon as he heard what happened. Carmen frowned. I don't understand. Why would he want to see us? Thomas told him about Maria, how a little girl saved his life by being brave enough to make that phone call. Mr. Blackwood wants to thank her personally. Is it safe? Maria asked. What if Mrs. Blackwood finds out? Detective Morrison's expression was grim. Victoria Blackwood was arrested this morning. We found evidence linking her to Marcus Webb, including financial records showing she paid him $50,000 the day before the incident. She's been charged with attempted murder, conspiracy, and child endangerment. Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her. So it's over? Not quite. Webb is still out there, and he knows you're the primary witness. Until we capture him, you're still in danger. An hour later, they arrived at Hartford General Hospital under heavy police escort. Thomas Blackwood's room was on the 4th floor, with armed guards stationed discreetly at both ends of the hallway. Maria had never been in a hospital before, and the smell of antiseptic and the constant beeping of machines made her nervous. But when they entered Thomas's room, her fears melted away. The boy in the wheelchair looked nothing like the helpless victim she'd seen in the street. Thomas was awake and alert, his dark hair tousled and his eyes bright with intelligence. Despite everything he'd endured, he managed a genuine smile when he saw her. "You must be Maria," he said, his voice stronger than she'd expected. "I'm Thomas. I guess I owe you my life." Standing beside the bed was a tall man with graying temples and kind eyes that reminded Maria of Thomas. Richard Blackwood looked exhausted and heartbroken, but when he saw Maria, his face lit up with genuine gratitude. "Maria," he said, kneeling down to her level, "I don't know how to thank you. If you hadn't been brave enough to call for help." "I just did what anyone would do," Maria replied quietly. "No," Thomas interjected. "Most people would have been too scared, or they wouldn't have cared enough to get involved. You saved my life." Richard Blackwood's eyes filled with tears. "Detective Morrison told me you overheard Victoria's plan, that you knew she was trying to hurt Thomas and you still found the courage to act." Maria nodded, still processing the enormity of what had happened. "Is she really going to jail?" "For a very long time," Richard confirmed. "Thanks to your testimony, the police have everything they need to convict her." Carmen stepped forward. "Mr. Blackwood, I want to apologize for bringing Maria to your house. I know it was against the rules." "Mrs. Santos," Richard interrupted gently, "your daughter's presence in my house was a miracle. If she hadn't been there, Thomas would be dead, and I would never have known it was murder." Thomas shifted in his wheelchair. "Dad, tell her about the lawyer." Richard smiled, the first genuine smile Maria had seen from him. "I've been speaking with my attorneys about setting up a college fund for Maria. Full tuition, room and board, books, everything she'll need for university when the time comes." Maria's eyes widened. "Really? It's the least I can do." "You gave me back my son." Carmen began to cry, tears of relief, gratitude, and overwhelming emotion. "Mr. Blackwood, that's too generous. We can't accept." "Mrs. Santos, please. Let me do this. And there's something else." Richard paused. "I'm looking for a new head of household staff for my estate, someone I can trust completely. The position comes with a substantial salary increase and housing on the property, a separate cottage with privacy and security." Maria watched her mother struggle with the offer. It represented everything they'd ever dreamed of: financial security, a good home, a future for Maria's education. But it also meant returning to a place where terrible things had happened. "The cottage is beautiful," Thomas added. "It has a big yard and it's far from the main house. You'd have your own space." Before Carmen could respond, Detective Morrison's radio crackled to life. "All units, be advised. Suspect Marcus Webb spotted 2 blocks from Hartford General, armed and considered extremely dangerous." The mood in the room shifted instantly. Detective Morrison moved to the window and peered through the blinds. "We need to move everyone to a secure location immediately," he announced. But as hospital security began implementing lockdown procedures, Maria realized something that made her blood run cold. If Marcus Webb had found them at the hospital, he might also know about the safe house. He might be planning to hurt other innocent people in his desperation to escape justice. "Detective Morrison," she said quietly, "what if he goes to our old house, or to the place where we were staying?" The detective's face went pale as he understood the implication. Webb wasn't just hunting them, he was hunting anyone who might have information about his location. And in his desperation, he'd become far more dangerous than any of them had imagined. The hunt for Marcus Webb was about to become a race against time, with innocent lives hanging in the balance. As alarms began to sound throughout the hospital, Maria grabbed Thomas's hand, and together they faced the unknown danger approaching from the shadows. The hospital lockdown transformed Hartford General into a fortress within minutes. Steel shutters slammed down over windows, elevators locked between floors, and armed security guards took positions at every entrance. Maria found herself in the center of a real-life nightmare as Detective Morrison coordinated with hospital security through his radio. Webb was spotted in the parking garage, came the crackling voice. Lost visual near the north stairwell. Thomas reached for Maria's hand as his father positioned the wheelchair away from the windows. Despite his own fear, the 12-year-old boy seemed more concerned about comforting her than his own safety. "He can't get up here," Thomas whispered. "The security is too tight." But Maria's sharp mind was already working through the possibilities. "Detective Morrison, does he know what I look like?" The detective paused his radio communications. "What do you mean?" "Victoria saw me at the police station. If she told him what I looked like or showed him a picture." Maria's voice trailed off as the terrifying implications became clear. Before Morrison could respond, his radio erupted with urgent chatter. "Security breach on the 3rd floor. Suspect may have accessed service elevator during shift change." Carmen pulled her daughter close as the reality hit them. Marcus Webb was inside the hospital, and he was getting closer. "That's it," Richard Blackwood declared. "I'm calling my private security team." "Mr. Blackwood, this is a police matter," Morrison began. "Detective, with all due respect, this man is hunting a 7-year-old child who saved my son's life. I have resources at my disposal, and I'm using them." Within moments, Richard was speaking rapidly into his phone, coordinating with what sounded like a small army of professional security personnel. Maria listened in amazement as this mild-mannered businessman transformed into someone who clearly knew how to handle dangerous situations. "They'll be here in 10 minutes, Richard announced. "Helicopter extraction to a secure facility outside the city." Morrison looked torn between protocol and practicality. "I can't authorize." His decision was made for him when the hospital's PA system crackled to life. "Code Silver. All personnel and visitors shelter in place immediately." "Code Silver means armed intruder," Thomas explained quietly. "It means he's definitely in the building." Through the small window in the door, they could see nurses and doctors hurrying past, some pushing patients in wheelchairs to secure areas. The normal bustle of hospital life had been replaced by controlled chaos. Maria's mind raced. Marcus Webb was desperate, armed, and getting closer by the minute. But something about the situation didn't feel right. Why would he trap himself in a building surrounded by police? Unless... "He's not trying to escape," she said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. "He's not planning to get away." Detective Morrison knelt down to her level. "What do you mean, Maria?" "Think about it. Victoria promised him money, but now she's in jail. The police know who he is, they have his picture, they're watching his family and friends. He can't hide forever." Carmen stared at her daughter in amazement. "Maria, what are you saying?" "He knows he's caught, so he's not trying to get away, he's trying to finish the job. Even if it means..." She couldn't bring herself to say the words, but everyone understood. Thomas gripped his wheelchair's armrests. "He's planning to hurt you and then surrender." "Or worse," Richard added grimly. Morrison was already calling for backup when they heard it, footsteps in the hallway too heavy and deliberate to belong to medical staff. Someone was moving systematically from room to room, getting closer to theirs. "Helicopter's 2 minutes out," Richard whispered into his phone. But 2 minutes felt like an eternity, as the footsteps stopped just outside their door. The handle turned slowly. Maria held her breath as Detective Morrison drew his weapon and positioned himself between the children and the door. Carmen wrapped her arms around her daughter, and Richard moved protectively in front of Thomas's wheelchair. The door opened to reveal not Marcus Webb, but Dr. Patricia Williams, Thomas's attending physician. She looked confused and concerned as she took in the scene. Armed detective, terrified family, the unmistakable tension of people expecting an attack. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said carefully, "but there's been a development." "What kind of development?" Morrison asked, not lowering his weapon. "Marcus Webb was found 20 minutes ago. He collapsed in the hospital parking lot from what appears to be a drug overdose. Paramedics are working on him now, but..." She paused. "It looks deliberate." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Webb hadn't come to the hospital to hurt them. He'd come to end his own life rather than face the consequences of his actions. "Is he going to survive?" Richard asked. It's touch and go. But detective, if he did this to himself, then the immediate threat to your witnesses is over. Morrison slowly holstered his weapon. I'll need to confirm this with my team. As radio chatter confirmed Dr. Williams's report, Maria felt the tension drain from her body. The nightmare was finally over. Victoria was in jail. Marcus Webb was no longer a threat, and Thomas was safe. But more than that, she realized, the experience had changed her forever. She'd learned that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do, that even a 7-year-old could make a difference when lives were at stake. And that real heroes weren't fearless, they were just brave enough to act despite their fear. Richard Blackwood knelt down beside her chair. Maria, that college fund I mentioned? I want to expand it. Full scholarship, plus additional support for graduate school if you're interested. Why? Maria asked simply. Because you have something special, the ability to see clearly in a crisis and the courage to act on what you see. The world needs more people like you. Thomas wheeled his chair closer. Plus, I could use a friend who's smart enough to save my life. Maria smiled, her first genuine smile in days. I'd like that. 3 months later, Carmen Santos moved into the head housekeeper position at the Blackwood estate, complete with the private cottage Richard had promised. Maria enrolled in an excellent private school nearby, where her quick thinking and natural leadership skills quickly made her popular with both teachers and classmates. Thomas recovered completely from his ordeal and became Maria's closest friend. Together, they created a bond that would last a lifetime, forged in crisis, but strengthened by mutual respect and genuine affection. Victoria Blackwood was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder and conspiracy. Marcus Webb survived his overdose but received a 15-year sentence for his role in the plot. And Detective Morrison? He kept the photo Maria drew for him, a picture of a little girl and a police officer working together to catch the bad guys, on his desk for the rest of his career, reminding him that sometimes the most important witnesses come in the smallest packages. The mansion on Elm Street regained its peace, no longer hiding dark secrets behind its beautiful facade. And in the cottage garden, Maria Santos grew up knowing that she had saved a life, stopped a murder, and proven that courage has nothing to do with size. Sometimes the most extraordinary heroes are ordinary children who simply refuse to look the other way when someone needs help. As Maria often told people years later, when she became a successful lawyer specializing in children's rights, you don't have to be big to make a big difference, you just have to care enough to try. The little guardian had become a force for justice that would echo through many lives for years to come.